My name is Naomi Ellis. I'm 41 years old, and for almost 2 decades I worked at a corporate consulting firm where I gave everything: late nights, lost weekends, client wins that made other people rich. I wasn't flashy, but I delivered consistently. I trained half the staff, brought in multi-million-dollar deals, and turned around accounts that others had abandoned. I thought my time had come when the senior partner position opened up. I had earned it. I knew it in my bones. So did everyone else. But they didn't promote me. Instead, they gave it to someone 15 years younger, a man who had been with the company barely long enough to memorize the internal phone directory. His name was Zach. Nice guy, good teeth, loud confidence. He once asked me to proof his pitch deck. Now he was my boss. I didn't cry. I didn't argue. I smiled, shook hands, and took the news like a team player. But inside, something shifted. I remembered every thankless night, every time I stayed late while the men went to drinks, every moment I covered for a VP who forgot their part of a project. I realized this company was never going to reward loyalty. It celebrated novelty, noise, and name recognition. I wasn't overlooked because I lacked skill. I was overlooked because I'd made their success look too easy. I had made myself too convenient to value. So I did what I'd never done before. I stopped giving them everything. Quietly, strategically, I began to track every client I had built relationships with over the years. I studied the contracts, the weak points, the exit clauses. I knew who made the decisions, I knew their pain points, and I knew how to build something better, not louder, better. 3 months after being passed over, I handed in my resignation, cordial, professional, and shockingly brief. They didn't even blink. "Let us know if you need a reference," Zach said smugly. I smiled. "Thank you, I will." What he didn't know, what none of them knew, was that I wasn't leaving to escape. I was leaving to compete, and I already had their top 5 clients on speed dial. I didn't start with a big office or a website or even a name. I started with silence. While Zach was settling into his new role and basking in the applause, I was meeting with vendors, freelancers, and quiet allies I had helped for years. People who owed me favors, not because I asked, but because I always showed up when no one else did. And now they were ready to show up for me. I called in my first favor 3 days after I left. A former client's quarterly campaign was failing, and they hadn't told the firm yet. I knew how to fix it in a week, and I did. Word spread fast, but not in the headlines, not in the industry journals. It spread through private Slack messages, whispered lunches, text chains between marketing directors and brand managers. "Naomi's doing consulting now. She fixed our ROI in 2 weeks. 1 client became 3. 3 became 10. All companies I had once personally managed, not stolen, earned, because I knew them. I listened when no one else did. They weren't switching agencies. They were coming home." Meanwhile, back at the firm, cracks were forming. Zach was struggling to retain accounts he'd never taken the time to understand. He relied on buzzwords and charm, but his follow-through was inconsistent. Upper management was confused. Why are legacy clients suddenly disengaging? I was never mentioned. That was the beauty of it. I wasn't loud. I was precise. I wasn't looking for revenge. I was creating results too powerful to ignore. By month 6, I had formed a boutique consultancy under my own name. No fluff, no investors, just reputation and execution. I didn't hire salespeople. I didn't need to. My results did the selling. Clients told other clients, "She doesn't pitch, she just solves." And the firm I left behind, they were still using outdated decks I had designed 2 years prior, still pretending I didn't matter, even as their numbers sank. Then came the call, not from Zach, from a senior partner, one of the few I still respected. "Naomi," he said, "we've had some leadership changes. Would you be open to returning in an executive capacity?" I stared at the message for a long time. It was tempting, but I had already learned my lesson. Going back would be like asking for a seat at a table I had already outgrown. I didn't need their offer, 'cause I had already built something better. The message from the senior partner sat unanswered for days, not because I didn't know what to say, but because I wanted to feel nothing when I said it. I read it once more, slowly. "We've had some leadership changes. Would love to discuss the possibility of you returning in a senior role." Leadership changes. Translation: Zach couldn't keep the ship afloat. I wasn't surprised, but I was curious. How long did it take them to realize I was the one holding it together all along? I finally replied with a single sentence: "Thank you for thinking of me, but I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be. That's all." No malice, no pride, just truth, because by then I had something they couldn't offer: peace. Every client I worked with now was someone I chose. Every project I touched felt like purpose, not politics. And when you've spent years being overlooked in the name of office hierarchies, choosing yourself becomes the highest promotion you'll ever receive. The firm began to bleed more accounts. Slowly at first, then like a flood. One of their biggest legacy clients reached out to me discreetly. "We're not looking for flash, Naomi. We're looking for someone who knows what the hell they're doing." I took the call, not out of revenge, but out of alignment. I wasn't hunting for their failure. I was catching what they failed to protect. There's a difference. I never cold called anyone. I never poached. I didn't need to. Loyalty flows where respect is felt. Meanwhile, whispers started in the industry. The firm's numbers were sliding. Reviews from former staff hinted at toxic leadership, broken culture, and a leader who didn't understand the business. One article called it a case study in ignoring your greatest assets. I didn't need to read between the lines. I was the line they ignored. I had been the structure beneath their story, and they never noticed until I walked away. Zach eventually reached out. A message on LinkedIn that read more like a confession than an apology. "I think I was promoted too soon. You made it look easy. I didn't realize how much you were holding together." I didn't respond, not out of spite, but because closure isn't always a conversation. Sometimes it's just living the life they said you'd never reach. 6 months turned into a year. My consultancy was thriving, not because I scaled fast, but because I built intentionally. Every client I brought in had history with me. Every campaign carried the fingerprints of someone who actually cared. I didn't just fix numbers, I restored trust. Meanwhile, my old firm kept trying to rebuild without knowing what had broken. They hired new consultants, brought in flashy executives with empty resumes, but the root issue wasn't talent, it was integrity, and that isn't something you can outsource. I started getting calls from former colleagues, people I had once mentored. "Noemi, you were right." They didn't say it directly, but I heard it in their voices. Some asked if I was hiring. Others simply wanted to thank me for the way I used to lead without a title. It was surreal, how the same people who once saw me as just dependable, now saw me as undeniable. Respect, it turns out, often arrives after you stop asking for it. One afternoon, I walked past the downtown building where I had once worked. Same glass walls, same tired branding, but it looked different now, smaller. Somehow, we used to call it the tower. It felt like a mountain back then, but now, it was just another office with a view. Funny how things shrink once you outgrow the need to be accepted inside them. Then came the final crack. A press release announced that the firm had lost 2 of its largest accounts, both now on my roster. They didn't name me, but they didn't have to. People in the industry knew, and the ones who didn't, they'd find out soon enough. I didn't gloat. I didn't send a message. I just forwarded the release to my team and said, "Let's be ready for the wave," because I knew what was coming. A week later, I was invited to speak at a national leadership conference, not as a replacement, as the keynote. The theme, building with purpose after being overlooked. I stood on that stage, looked out at a sea of young professionals, and began with the truth. Sometimes the best revenge is quietly becoming everything they told you you weren't. And the applause that followed, it wasn't just for the speech, it was for the story they saw in themselves. The standing ovation at the end of my speech didn't hit all at once. It rolled like a tide, slow and full, as if everyone in that room had been holding their breath. Some people clapped with pride, others with tears in their eyes. A few came up afterward and whispered, "Thank you." I needed to hear that, but what struck me the most was a moment backstage when a young woman, maybe in her 20s, approached with trembling hands. "They told me I was too quiet to lead," she said. I smiled. Good, quiet builds power they'll never see coming. In the days that followed, my inbox flooded with speaking invitations, podcast requests, and corporate coaching offers. I turned most of them down. I didn't want fame. I wanted freedom, and I already had it. But one message stopped me in my tracks. It was from the founder of a company I had once begged to notice me, before the promotion, before the fall, before I ever had my name on a door. "I finally read your story," it began. "I think we made a mistake years ago. If you're ever open to joining our board." I stared at that message for a long time, not because I needed their offer, but because I no longer needed their permission. This was the irony. When I was chasing titles, no one looked twice, but when I stopped chasing and started building, the world turned toward me. That's when I realized something permanent. Real leadership doesn't wait to be recognized, it reveals itself in results no one can deny. Back at the office, I walked through the workspace I had created, bright, calm, efficient. My team was small but unstoppable. I overheard laughter in the hallway, a brainstorming session in progress, clients on Zoom calls asking for me, but happily trusting my team. This wasn't just a business, it was a second chance offered not by a corporation, but by myself. I had created the kind of workplace I used to dream about while staring out the office window, wondering if anyone truly saw me. Later that evening, I framed a copy of my first rejection letter, the one from the firm I left behind. I didn't hang it out of spite, I hung it as proof that the things meant to break you can become the blueprint for everything you'll later build. I didn't need a promotion, I needed vision. Once I trusted mine, no one could take it from me. A year after I walked out of that firm, for the last time, I stood on the rooftop of my own office, nothing towering or gold-plated, just clean glass and a view of the city I once felt invisible in. The wind felt different up there, not like something to brace against, but something to breathe. Below me, I could see the traffic, the office lights, the lives rushing to stay in motion, but I was still, completely still, not because I had stopped, but because I no longer had to run to prove I belonged. The emails from the firm trickled in for a while. Apologies, regrets, quiet admissions that what I'd carried had never really been noticed until it was gone. Zach, I heard, had left the industry, burnout, or maybe just the weight of trying to lead something he never earned. I didn't follow the details, because by then I'd realized something most people never do. You don't have to destroy anyone to win, just build something strong enough that their weakness can no longer touch you. I had become everything they said I wasn't. A leader, a builder, a visionary. But more than that, I had become free from needing validation, free from shrinking to fit their frame. And that kind of freedom doesn't scream, it doesn't storm into boardrooms. It walks quietly into the life it created, fully aware of what it survived to get there. One night while preparing for another speaking engagement, I pulled out my old ID badge from the firm. My name, my photo, no title, just a barcode. Back then, that was all I was to them, a function, a fixture. Now, my name meant something, not because of a door it opened, but because of the doors I built for others to walk through. To anyone listening, if you've ever been passed over, underestimated, or told to wait your turn, know this: your power isn't in being chosen, it's in choosing yourself, quietly, strategically, and when the moment comes, you won't need to announce that you've made it. The results will speak for you, loudly. Because sometimes the best way to rise